TI Insights, Taiwan Security Review, and Taiwan Salon, our cultural policy podcast. We also pursue this mission through public policy seminars, such as the one we are holding today, as well as occasional reports, longer research reports on a particular issue. And I suppose that today's event is a combination of those latter two things. Today's event is being held as a release event, actually for two research reports on this topic. A report both performed by us here at the GTI, titled Chinese Information Operations Against Taiwan, the Abandoned Chess Piece and American Skepticism Theory, as well as a parallel research report that has been performed by the Information Environment Research Center in Taiwan, titled U.S. Skepticism Narratives and Where They Come From. So the overall topic of today's event, the past year has seen a growing prominence in Taiwan's media and information environment for what we're calling American skepticism theory, or Luan, which is a broad set of narratives that depicts the United States as an unreliable and even treacherous partner for Taiwan, and one that will abandon Taiwan when its interests call for it to do so. The origins of this narrative are complex. They do grow out of Taiwan's own domestic discourse and some issues of past friction in the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, but they are actively promoted and amplified by an active propaganda campaign conducted by the government of the People's Republic of China. I don't want to take up too much time, but we will be having a discussion of two reports today. I'll be giving a presentation on the GTI report, for which I was the author. We also have with us today Mr. Zhihao Yu, who is the co-director of the Information Environment Research Center, still operating under the old acronym IORG in Taiwan. We'll be discussing the IORG that has been released. And I think while these two reports are separate, and they were performed separately by each organization, I think they're complementary in nature. I know the GTI report, for which I was the author, is much more narrative and case study focused, I think, whereas the report from IORG is very data-driven and I think quantitative in nature in terms of analyzing this issue. And so I hope the two will be complementary in sort of looking at this issue from different perspectives or with different methodologies. We also have two very distinguished speakers to discuss aspects of this. And I'll give each speaker sort of a more detailed introduction when it's their turn to speak. But we're very honored to have with us today Dr. Wu Wei-Ping, a former journalist and PhD in journalism, who researches issues related to disinformation and Taiwan's media environment, as well as Mr. Benjamin Sando, who will be joining us remotely over a link from Taiwan, who is currently, in addition to being a graduate student at Georgetown University, he's a current research fellow with the Development Lab, another civil society organization in Taiwan that also looks at issues related to propaganda and disinformation. I'd like to give a special note. I think we have prizes due to Mr. Yu for traveling the farthest for anyone to be with us here today, having come from Taiwan, as well as a special note of thanks to Mr. Sando for joining us at a very uncivilized hour, starting this at 11 p.m. Taiwan time at the end of a very long day. So special notes of thanks to the two of you there. Today's format will be, I think, fairly standard for a think tank discussion. I think each speaker has a presentation. We will then speak for 10 to 15 minutes, maybe with some flexibility on the time. And then after that, we will go to a Q&A and a moderated discussion. I'm going to violate the usual format just a little bit, I guess, by being both speaker and moderator. But I will try to keep my own introduction relatively brief so that we can then turn to A final note to those watching us online through the stream. Wanted to remind you that you too are part of this conversation. So when we get to the Q&A, if you have questions you would like to address to the panelists, you may do so either by placing those in the those questions in the YouTube chat window, or by emailing them to the email address contact@globaltaiwan.org. Again, contact@globaltaiwan.org. A final note for those watching through the stream, I think we have put the URLs for both reports, both my GTR report and for the IORG report. The URLs have been placed in the YouTube chat window as well, if you wish to access them. And both reports are now available on each organization's website as well. So I think without further ado, I will give my own presentation, again, trying to keep it relatively brief so as not to hog all the time, and then turn it over to the real experts that we have. Yeah, my brief ready? Okay, you go ahead and go to the first slide. So whoops. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So again, the ETR report is titled Chinese Information Operations, America's Skepticism Theory and Abandoned Chess Piece. And I'll take those one by one. So the overall rubric of America's Skepticism Theory, as I said, this is sort of a narrative or a set of narratives that has become more prominent in Taiwan's information space in the last year or the last handful of years. The Mandarin term, could actually be translated a few different ways. I chose to translate it as American Skepticism Theory. I think in the IORG report, you'll see it referred to as U.S. skepticism. And it could potentially be translated some other ways too. The E of that could also perhaps mean doubt, suspicion, something like that. But just a sort of a general indication of distrust or unreliability. Now, this theory, or this narrative, I should say, it plays off some past legacies of U.S. Taiwan frictions, such as the 1979 switch of diplomatic recognition from the Republic of China to the People's Republic of China. More recent events played into it too. The U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and the collapse of the Afghan government is a major element that's often played up within the narratives of American skepticism theory. And you'll see that discussed in a bit more detail. But there are a few key elements of it. One thing I think is important to note about the American skepticism theory, it usually depicts Taiwan as sort of having no agency of its own, as sort of a state sort of at the mercy of other countries around it. And I identify sort of what I identify anyway, as four key elements of American skepticism theory. The first being that America is deceitful and treacherous. The second being that Taiwan is being exploited as a tool of U.S. schemes to contain China. And it sort of presents or often depicts Taiwan in that way, and so rules out in the sense that there could be, for example, some ideological affinity between the United States and Taiwan and its fellow democracies. Within this set of narratives, again, Taiwan is simply a tool that's being manipulated by the United States in its conflict with China. The third element is that America is going to eventually abandon Taiwan when it suits U.S. interests to do so. And then the fourth element, that because of all this, that it's in the best interest of Taiwan to seek out an accommodation with the PRC, or at the very least, sort of seek a neutral stance between the sides. And I argue in our report that this is part of an active Chinese state propaganda campaign. I do not argue that all of this was completely generated by the Chinese Communist Party propaganda system. and it does play off of existing discourse within Taiwan, but that there is an active Chinese government-directed propaganda campaign to to promote and amplify this narrative as a way of trying to drive a wedge in U.S.-Taiwan relations. Next slide. Central elements that I identify or discuss in the report anyway is Taiwan as the abandoned chess piece. It's a key part of this narrative that he repeated over and over. Various news articles, propaganda materials, and so forth. This narrative, or sort of parallel narrative, I guess I should say, depicts Taiwan as a chess piece or cheese that is being used by the United States in its rivalry with China. That term "cheese" is used a lot, as well as the term "maqianzi," which is a little bit awkward to translate directly, but it's on in front of the lips, upon before the lips, from a Chinese chess set. In this narrative, or this parallel narrative, America is sometimes identified directly, sometimes it's vaguely alluded to as a powerful formidable that is trying to make Taiwan into a chess piece. You see that theme and that language over and over. You can also see associated with it sometimes there's the word "chizza" in chess piece, and it can be associated as well with "chizza," almost the same pronunciation but with a different tone, meaning like this, a discarded or abandoned thing. But they're both going towards the same meaning, that Taiwan is sort of a manipulated proxy of the United States that will be abandoned when it suits U.S. interests to do so. As I said, the report that I wrote is largely narrative focused and case study focused, trying to provide examples of this discourse from both traditional and online media, and both against from the TRC as well as from in Taiwan. What the graphic you see on the screen are a couple of images I pulled from a Chinese PRC state media news video pushing the chess piece narrative, and the Chinese characters you see at the bottom of the screen translate to, as Taiwan scholars sharply point out, in the eyes of America, Taiwan is a chess piece, and at any time to become a discarded and sacrificed chess piece. That word "sacrifice," "xishan," is often used quite a bit in conjunction with discussion of the chess piece as well. Could you go to the next slide? Just one more example of that you can see discussed in the report. This is from CCTV, Chinese State Television. This is a news segment featuring an interview with an academic from Taiwan, a professor at Xiang, faculty member at Shen Yun University, titled "Taiwan Youth Don't Want to Be Pawns of Taiwan Independence Politicians." And it is using, again, some of that key language. It's using the pawn before the horse language, the maqianzi, I think, and in the commentary. I wanted to cite this or point it out as an example of one of the methods that are used in this Chinese state propaganda campaign. They will sort of take figures from sort of the relatively marginal pro-unification spectrum of Taiwan politics and amplify their messages and try to present them as being reflective of broader mainstream opinion within Taiwan. Let's go to the next slide. Here I have just a couple more examples of how the chess piece narrative in particular has played out in recent political discourse in Taiwan. In the image and quote at the top, if you're not familiar with Zhao Xiaopeng, he's a prominent media commentator in Taiwan, sort of a firebrand political commentator. Some people call him Taiwan's Tucker Carlson. But this is from an interview in early January where he was criticizing the Kuomintang KMT for allegedly being too pro-American in its policies. And he said this in this media interview. it's a woman now capable of saying to America, I'm not on the chess piece. The chess piece narrative or metaphor has cropped up in a number of other cases. And again, I cite some of these in the report. But just one of the examples at the bottom is an excerpt from a speech given by the current KMT presidential candidate on New Year's Day. The mayor of New Taipei City, where he said in a speech, amidst the Ukraine war and U.S.-China competition, Taiwan cannot stay involved or offside, but we are absolutely not a powerful chess piece. Again, using Chongguo, powerful sees the language, you see repeated over and over again as part of this character. So this language has sort of seeped in to political discourse in mainstream political discourse in Taiwan. On this slide, I provide just a couple more examples that are cited and discussed in the report of how proxy figures are used as part of, again, what I identify as a Chinese government-driven propaganda campaign, and one that uses proxy figures in Taiwan. In the example at the top, it is an image taken from a TikTok video of an interview with Ho Hanping, who is a city council member in Taipei, and at least as far as I was able to tell from our research, I think it's the only member of the new party, the Xindang, to actually hold any sort of prominent elected office in Taiwan. The Xindang is a sort of a marginal pro-unification party in Taiwan. And in this interview, Ho was speaking to elements that you see repeated over and over again in Chinese Communist Party narratives about America, and particularly presenting the argument that U.S. arms sales to Taiwan were actually part of an American plot to lure Taiwan and the PRC into war in order to weaken China, America's. Sort of a very long-standing Chinese Communist Party narrative. And members of the new party, you'll see them sort of pop up repeatedly as proxy figures. Or again, as I argue, the Chinese are giving messages that align very closely with Chinese government. The other example that I have at the bottom is again one that I profile in the report from February of this year, where on the Facebook accounts of Tsai Chong-yen, a former KMT legislator, who posted on his Facebook site this series of slides and commentary, which called the 7 Laws of U.S. Diplomacy. And in the report, I discussed this as an example of what I believe is sort of CCP or PRC propaganda laundering, that they will prepare materials that are then presented by a proxy as if this was original material made by the proxy. For this particular bit of material, Chinese state press actually had ran articles sort of praising this as very clever, original satirical material produced by Tsai. But if you look at, actually for both of these examples, for those who can read Chinese, you'll see in both cases the text that appears with them is in simplified characters that are used in the PRC, rather than the traditional characters more widely employed in Taiwan, which it's kind of sloppy. It's like not even making that much of an effort to hide where this material actually comes from. It's kind of lazy. Go on to the next slide. And this I'll just mention very quickly. Also, as I discussed in the report, I have a section on what I identify as sort of associated narratives or sub-narratives of America. The idea that America is using Taiwan as a proxy to contain China, claiming China card. Sub-narrative paired to identify here with the criticisms made of the Democratic Progressive Party, Communist Party, for sort of sellouts to America Sub-narrative 30, the U.S. military commitments speak, and also within that, I discuss sub-narratives on Afghanistan, or assertions that collapse of Afghanistan indication that America will not provide meaningful support for Taiwan, as well as criticisms of arms sales as being certainly overpriced junk. Like America is selling cast-off equipment. Taiwan is basically the idea there. And I'm a huge fan of local cartoons from Chinese state propaganda outlets. I love them to death. Uncle Sam is always up to something nefarious. So you can see here how Uncle Sam is pushing Tsai Ing-wen to buy a junky cast-off American guns. And you can also see Uncle Sam getting ready to light a match to start off a war in the lower left. As these, some of these narratives or sub-narratives get more extreme, they lead up to the point where there's a thread in these propaganda narratives now that America actually has an active plan to destroy Taiwan. The American plan to destroy Taiwan is something that you've seen in sources. And actually, I believe, I don't want to steal anything thunder. I think there are elements of that discussed in the IORG report as well. So I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm going to conclude there just by saying that while some of the elements of this might seem a bit outlandish, I think it is true that American skepticism has come to occupy actually a common place in Taiwan's domestic discourse. I think some of the other speakers will speak that Dr. Lee, for example. But while I think a lot of this is, again, does grow out of indigenous political discourse, or domestic political discourse in Taiwan, it is being very actively amplified and promoted by the CCP propaganda system, and I would argue by co-opted individuals associated with that system in Taiwan as a means to drive a wedge between the United States and Taiwan. So I'm going to conclude my own part there, and I don't want to go over on time. I want to turn next to our other speakers, and particularly next to Mr. Yu. Let me give you a proper introduction here. We are lucky to have with us today Mr. Zhihao Yu. He is a software engineer and information designer and the co-director of the Taiwan Information Environment Research Center, formerly the Information Operations Research Group for IORG, based in Taipei, Taiwan. Mr. Yu coordinates scientific research, data engineering, community engagement, and international exchange for his organization, and directing a capacity for safeguarding election integrity and building greater democratic resistance in Taiwan. Mr. Yu is also a contributor to, I'm going to mangle this, Gov0, G0B, to Gov0, a civic hacking community in Taiwan, as well as an organizer of Facing the Ocean, a West Pacific civic hacking network. So Mr. Yu, I will turn the floor to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you for having me, John. Thank you to you guys. I'm not sure if it sounds okay. It's not. Hi everyone. I'm Zhihao. I'm from Taiwan. I work at IORG, which is now standing for Taiwan Information Environment Research Center, or Taiwan 资讯环境研究中心. Today I'm going to talk to you about our report, U.S. skepticism narratives, and where they come from. I'm going to apologize now for saying the word skepticism too many times. It's a very difficult word to pronounce, so you have to excuse me for that. You can scan for the QR code for the full report. It's pretty long. I also apologize for that. But you can also just go on our website, IORG.tw. It's the first link. Also, the slide deck today is also public. You can access with this tiny URL here. So and it's going to remain up, so you don't have to take photos or research. You just want the content of the slide deck. Okay. Next slide, please. So, as I was saying, I'm working at Taiwan Information Environment Research Center. We started in 2019 in Taiwan. We are currently a group of social scientists and data engineers. We work at various issues that are related to Taiwan's information environment, that includes online platforms, as well as traditional news media and web forums. Next slide, please. So we are very concerned about how Taiwanese information environment is progressing. Our past research have indicated that it's getting harder and harder for people to talk about public issues on the internet. So we're very concerned about that, especially for myself, growing up with the internet and having sort of aspirations about how internet can be, of course, for good, for democracy. Now it's a lot of indications saying it's the opposite. So we're conducting data-driven research and as well as traditional social science research to figure out what are the problems in our information environment and what can we do about it. Next slide, please. Our biggest research tool is what we call the IORG Information Environment Archive, currently focused on Mandarin information. We collect a lot of data from all of these platforms that you see. Currently, our system processes around 12 million documents every day, including text and video content as well. So we use that big archive to do our research. In looking at various events and various topics in our information environment, we use this large data set to identify important topics with a big circle. And then the big circle has topic, for example, Fukushima nuclear wastewater. That's a topic that's pretty specific. Also, U.S. skepticism is a very large topic. So topics can be large and or small. And the topic is defined by a very large group of content, like documents, Facebook posts, news media articles, YouTube videos, TikTok videos, so on and so forth. Within that group of documents, as a topic, we can use traditional mechanisms, but also AI-powered tools to identify narratives in our data sets, and that's how we do our research. That's why we can confidently say that it's a data-driven research. Okay, and with this sort of process, you identify topic and the trend of the topic. For example, when is a certain topic popular amongst Taiwanese people, or when it is not. And when we identify narrative, we also see the behavior of this narrative, saying that who is talking about this narrative and who is talking with what content. And that's what our research can also show. And at the atomic level of this research method is the documents, like the posts, the reports, the articles. And with that, you also see sort of the actors who published what, who, and when are also important in our research. So next slide, please. I hope that was like a brief but clear enough explanation of how we do what we do. So US skepticism. So it's important to specify the range of time looking into this topic. It's 2021 all the way to June this year, 2023. And then we identify fields are more or less connected to Taiwan-US relations, but some of them less so, some of them more so. And we identify 84 narratives, 84 concrete narratives from actual documents that are spreading in our information environment that we categorize as US skepticism. We have a working definition of the term US skepticism. Thanks, John, to us the skepticism theory. You may look, it's unreasonable narrative claiming that Taiwan should keep its distance or turn away, reduce our cooperation, our relationship with the U.S. And we further categorize, grouped the 84 narratives into 8 types, which we'll get into in a moment. And then some characteristics. So next slide, please. These are the 12 events. This is 9 of them because I don't want to make the text too small, so we'll see another 3. These are events we identified in 2021 and 2022. And then from each box, you'll see like an example narrative of what we found for that event. For example, the first one, during 2021, when COVID got serious in Taiwan, we are short of vaccines. So there were examples about, it's a pretty crude translation. Thursday buys weapon, Sunday gifted vaccine. 周四买疫苗 sorry, 周四买武器，周日送疫苗. It connects 2 not necessarily connected events. Like one is Taiwanese government approved budget for U.S. arm cell, and the other one is U.S. gifting Moderna vaccines to Taiwan. So that was one of the examples. That was one of the example narratives we found related to the vaccine. For more crazy ones, for example, the TSMC expansion incident towards the end of last year. We're looking at all the narratives related to TSMC last year. And one of them, here, number 56, the U.S. will extract TSMC engineers, implement scorched earth policy, and destroy Taiwan. That's pretty out there, but we did see that spreading in tone. Very different. Next slide, please. These are 3 events from the first half of this year. Of course, our president Shen Yun transited the U.S. In April to talk about how Taiwan's visit will bring about war. One. And one of the longer analysis that we did was about the 5 shortages. That is talking about a shortage of electricity, water, eggs, chicken eggs, medicine, and meat, mainly pork. So those are supposed to be very domestic, everyday life issues, but somehow also linked to Taiwan-U.S. relations. They're usually with the propagandists, or some of them are actually related to national. For example, this one, number 83, says that Taiwanese people can't eat meat, can't eat eggs. Our government is cooperating with the U.S. plan to destroy Taiwan, making people eat bombs. And these are all very crude translation from the actual document. Okay, so I hope that that was 12 events from 2021 to the first half of this. So these are the 8 types. So these we came up with ourselves, and you'll immediately see that first type, abandonment, which is very connected to what John was saying about the abandoned chess piece. So you see these 8 types, and 4 of them are addressing the U.S.-Taiwan relations, the relationship between Taiwan and the U.S. And 4 of them are addressing the U.S. itself. Like those are 2 different things that different narratives can address. For the 4 types that are addressing Taiwan-U.S. relations, we're talking about the U.S. as a fake friend that will abandon Taiwan. The U.S. is colluding with Taiwanese elites that will ultimately destroy Taiwan. That is the characterization of this narrative on U.S.-Taiwan relations. For the 4 types that are addressing the U.S. itself, talking about the U.S., how the U.S. is weak, we cannot defend Taiwan. Will bring about chaos in the world, not only in talking about how the U.S. is not alternative picked up by these narratives. And its action is being opposed by a lot of countries in the world for the freedom itself. So these state types we'll go into more detail later on in the final step of how these state types also correspond or resonate with other ERC propaganda that are not US skepticism. We think that corresponding is very important. Next slide, please. So we're data people, so we like to do these like very difficult to understand tables. So basically, these are the 12 events, right? From 2021, first half of this year. The horizontal axis, 8 types, and the numbers just it's the numbers for each narrative, so 1 to 84. And the color coding is the interesting part, right? We first want to look at who are talking about these narratives according to our data set. So whenever a narrative, which is a group of documents, whenever that group of documents contains something from the PRC state media, state agency, or affiliated media, or one of their ambassadors, we designated to be a PRC amplified narrative. Whenever it's not a PRC amplified narrative. So we color code this data with that methodology. And you'll see most of these narratives are red, right? Meaning that most of these narratives have received notification from the PRC outlets. Some of them are blue, which means that according to our data set, at least, these narratives are not amplified by PRC, which is also a very interesting behavior to analyze. We'll talk about. We also did find some sort of PRC plus Russian official amplifications together on some narrative those are the underlying numbers, 35 and 37, which can be an interesting thing to do. Okay, so that is narrative amplification. And then next slide, narrative creation. So very different color. Right? So the red one, again, created by PRC outlet. So the blue one, created by Taiwanese actors. So we need to, first of all, remind ourselves the distinction. The PRC actors are state-sponsored, state-backed or state-controlled, while the Taiwanese actors are not. They're civilian or private media. So very different from the start. So, color coding. So the red PRC, the pink Chinese, meaning that we can't find any concrete evidence that these outlets are connected to the PRC state or the but still they're Chinese origin. Orange one, Russia state, the yellow, Malaysian, and then blue, Taiwan. So we see this graph looks pretty different from the last one, which is this one is very blue. Meaning that according to our data set, a lot of these narratives are created by Taiwanese actors, but they're just amplified by PRC actors. Remembering the last one. Next slide, please. So from these data evidence, we can sort of include some things. I'm hoping more from your expertise. One is that the PRC amplifies while Taiwanese actors create something that we can sort of conclude from the data. And the second one, we can look at what are the types that each of these group of actors like to create. And we found for PRC actors, they like to create fake friend narrative and collusion narratives. Saying again that the US is a fake friend that is colluding with sacrifice Taiwanese people or to destroy Taiwan, whatever. And while the Taiwanese actors like a very anthropomorphic word, let's say it, like to create collusion narratives, chaos narrative, and abandonment narrative. Again, US is colluding with Taiwan elites, US is creating chaos in the world, and the US is abandoned. So those are the things that data tell. And we can further interpret the data to provide these two concepts. Over the years, we see the development of US narrative U.S. skepticism narrative avoids conflict. So, for example, in 2021, a lot of the narratives we see are abandoning Taiwan and using Taiwan. And then towards 2022 and 2023, more narratives talk about the disruption that I think signals the rising tension, either in our region or in the minds of the propagandists they want to escalate. Another thing that we are also interested in is why are Taiwanese actors creating and amplifying these narratives, U.S. skepticism. And our conclusion are four things. From the fact that Taiwanese actors create the most collusion narratives, we think that it's due to the polarizing partisanship in Taiwan society. And from the fact that Taiwanese actors create a lot of chaos narratives, we think that it speaks to a recognition of U.S. global power and the presence of war anxiety in Taiwanese society. Last, Taiwanese actors create a lot of abandonment narratives, which we think talks about a existing collective orphan mentality, which John was also talking a little bit about. An example would be the U.S. switch of diplomatic recognition from the ROC to the PRC in the 70s. We further argue that this sort of orphan mentality might be even more rooted in our society due to the roughly 400-year of colonial history in Taiwan. So yeah, those are the very brief conclusions that we want to present today. And finally, I want to talk about the pairing between types of U.S. skepticism and other PRC propaganda that are not U.S., that are not explicitly anti-U.S. So next slide. So now, type A and type B talked about U.S. is a frequent and will abandon, and sort of complementary, sort of to complement that. What complement? Yeah. China is the real family and has come to Taiwan's aid. So examples include in 2021, Chinese propaganda talks a lot about how China wants and are providing vaccines to Taiwan and overseas Taiwanese. In these two, one is U.S. skepticism, one is non-U.S. skepticism, PRC propaganda. We argue that these two together sort of combines and creates a more complete worldview for Mandarin speakers that might be more convincing. We present four variants here. One of them we talk about, and the second one is type B and type H. We exclude the Taiwanese elite will destroy Taiwan. Pair with that, the PRC propaganda talks about how the PPP government, or Taiwanese government, is perverse. But this is our translation. The exact wording is 倒行逆施 and sells out Taiwanese people. You find more examples in the full version. Here, the next slide. And type B and F talk about U.S. weak and not a democracy. At the same time, the PRC propaganda is talking about China is powerful, militarily, economically, and truly democratic. They have this 全过程人民民主 probably saying it wrong, but full process. And then lastly, type C and type G talk about the U.S. is source of chaos in the world and acts unilaterally. Again, sometimes true. At the same time, propaganda talks about PRC propaganda talks about China is the defender of world order, 捍卫者, 维护者, whatever they use, and promote the democratization of global governance. UN, the national organization, talk about the 内命运共同, the shared destiny, common humankind. Okay, so that's the last thing I want to talk to you about today. Last slide. And then again, we use data science to talk about information manipulation in our environment. we're now calling for partners. You want to use our data in your research. You want to develop the archive with us. You are very welcome to email hi@iorg.tw. The full report again is on our website. Thank you for listening.
Gerhard, thank you very much for that very comprehensive summary of your report. As I mentioned at the outset, I think IORG report's approach is very data driven. I think you can see there. I think my own report is quite lazy in comparison, involving a few months of work. I think you can see years of work going into that one. But thank you very much for your presentation, Gerhard. I'd like to turn next to Dr. Wei-Ping Li for her comments on the reports and on Taiwan's information about the current state of it. Dr. Li earned her PhD from the University of Maryland's Philip Merrill College of Journalism. Her research interests include propaganda, social media content moderation, and digital privacy challenges. Prior to entering academia, she was also a consultant in the field of digital human rights. She has also worked as a journalist in Taiwan in a variety of media outlets. And Dr. Li received also her law degree, her Master of Laws from the University of Pennsylvania Law School, and was admitted to the New York State Bar as an attorney to practice in 2009. So quite a renaissance woman, we could say. But Dr. Li, I'd like to turn the floor over to you.
My name is Wei-Ping Li, and I'm a researcher focusing on conspiracy theory, propaganda, and disinformation, and how these problematic information affect Taiwan, especially Taiwan's news media. I want to thank you, John and the GTI for inviting me to this very inspiring, very exciting discussion about American skepticism theory. I also want to thank you too for the privilege to let me read the draft. My comments will be divided into two parts. For the first part, I would go over my feedback on these two reports. And for the second part, I want to try to approach this topic from the angle of Taiwan's media. So, excuse me. I want to start with the GTI report, John's report. I don't agree with you. That's a lazy word. Totally not agree. Actually, I think this report offers very good, good encapsulation of the sentiment, the scope, and the definition of American skepticism. And this report also offers some important instances for us to understand the substance of this theory. And it's quite a good starting point for us, for those who are interested in this phenomenon, to explore. And also, I think your report offers some very useful background information about the history, to the roots of other ideologies of American skepticism theory, and it's quite helpful for those who are not familiar with Taiwan or some historical information. Also, when I was reading this report, I'm also intrigued by the question that how is the skepticism theory reflected Taiwan's media? I mean, not only those media which are for China, but also for media overall. Are there other media who unwisely promote this kind of theory? Or do they have any resistance to this kind of skepticism. So I think your report could inspire a lot of further research on this topic. And for IORG's report, thank you for all this hard work. And I really like the categorization of the narratives. I think that the 8 types of narratives are really useful and for further research to dive in. And I also like that you combine these narratives with amplifiers and creators and try to find which party would be inclined to invent or to create what kind of types. But I also think I'm very interested in how IORG define creators, buyers, and also how to confirm if this messages, this information was really very first created by some organizations, because in our basic information study area, it's always a very vexing question for us because it's really hard to confirm who is the creator of information. And so from here, I want to try in my observations on the Taiwanese media environment, and if there are opportunities and the challenges for Taiwanese media to counter skepticism theory. So next slide, please. So for me, I want to define American skepticism theory as conspiracy theories. So conspiracy theories are about statements which says there are powerful groups or individuals behind the events who try to exploit others for their own goods. And conspiracy theories are usually years in the making. It's not just about a certain time. It's actually booming, have been booming for a long time, in fact. And it combines with ideologies, combined with some myth, with rumors, with people's identities, and of course, there are some facts in the conspiracy theory. So it makes conspiracy theories so hard to counter. And it as I said, it will be moving in the background, but at some time, at a turbulent time, it just pop out and become prevalent. So from this point of view, for American skepticism, I think it quite fits into the category of conspiracy theories because American skepticism argue that the United States are going to exploit Taiwan for their own goods, and they will abandon or even destroy Taiwan at some point. And as GTS report and the IORG report pointed out, they have some historical roots. And it also resonated with some Taiwanese identities or ideologies, and also some very troubling events in the past. And now, at this moment, Taiwan is faced with the growing threats from China and a very uncertain relationship, Taiwan, China, and the United States, and people want to predict what will be in the future. So this is a timing for the American skepticism theory become prevalent in Taiwan. So next slide, please. So here is a very simple illustration about Taiwan's media environment and how information flow from information creators to audiences. So for the information creators, especially this information creators, in addition to the Chinese entities that these two reports mentioned, there are also Taiwanese actors who act as information creators. But in a democratic country, in a democratic society, there will always be misinformation. There will always be creators and providers of misinformation, conspiracy theories. We don't have to worry too much if we have a robust media system and responsible media outlets. But what we are facing here in Taiwan, the problem is that we are not sure if our media outlets could be safeguards or the amplifiers of these conspiracy theories and disinformation. So I want to take you to have a quick look at the Taiwanese media environment right now. Next slide, please. So this is a research conducted by Professor Liu at the National Taiwan University. She collaborates with Reuters Institute. And according to her research, so this is how Taiwanese people receive information. So as you can see that 75% of Taiwanese people receive information from online media, including websites and social media. And still, there are 56% of Taiwanese receive information from traditional TV news. So we still cannot ignore the influence of the Taiwan TV news. So next, please. And talking about online media, as we can see from this image, Yahoo News is the most popular information source. Yahoo News is actually a news aggregated news portal which have display a lot of news pieces from different news outlets. And so Yahoo News is followed by ET News, ET Today News, and TBS News. And Line News, another news aggregator, is also the main source of the Taiwanese people news information. So what do these images tell us? So next, please. Here we can see some challenges. Taiwanese media to become the safeguards against the disinformation conspiracy theories. So the first challenge is that Taiwanese media could be problematic information creators and buyers. So I don't know if you are aware that a very recent news that there is news published by United Daily News saying that the United States are trying to push Taiwan to develop new bioweapons and to establish P4 laboratories in Taiwan. And this news is unverified and has been debunked by several credible fact-checking initiatives in Taiwan and in Asia. So this is totally not true, but it's created by Taiwan news outlets, United Daily News. So this is an example that Taiwanese media could be a creator of this information. Second, please. Next, please. Yeah. So the second challenge is that now we are faced with very fragmented media environment. So which means that it's algorithms which decide what we can see in our news sources. As I mentioned before, Yahoo News and Line News, Line Today has become the main sources of Taiwanese news information. And it's the algorithm to decide what audience could see. And sometimes they are good information, but most of the times they are very trivial information, which could not offer useful information for audiences, and even sometimes create fatigue among audiences. So that's this. And the third challenge is that the Taiwanese media actually don't have robust media practices. If you are interested in Taiwanese Chinese media's news article, you can see that most of them are very short articles, which fail to provide background information or to put this information in contextual, in context. So, which means that it's very hard if you want to use this information to combat conspiracy theories, because as I mentioned, conspiracy theory is combined with there's historical events, rumors, myths. If you want to combat this kind of information, you have to have another narratives which are put into context and it can convince audiences, can rebut this very problematic information. But Chinese media, I haven't seen a lot of them doing this. So next, please. So as a result, the Chinese people actually don't have a lot of trust in Chinese media. As you can see from this graphic, the trust score is really low, 58%. And so people actually sometimes they will just believe the media they want to believe, and or to go to the persons they think they can trust to as their information sources. Next, please. Yeah, and another thing is about online social media. So the problem is that we don't know why we were seeing this content. The algorithms on social media are really opaque and not transparent. For the past few years, we did see that social media companies help Taiwan to counter disinformation in elections. But we still don't know how the algorithms are come up with. And we now rely on this social media's goodwill to help us. But we don't know if this kind of help will sustain, especially when there are changes in companies' policies or even personnel. So I think it's important that we keep monitoring the change of social media policies in the social media environment. Next, please. So my conclusions is that we have to recognize that American skepticism theories are not only just a few pieces of disinformation that to debunk. Actually, we are facing a formidable enemy, and it's very hard to tackle. And what we can do now is to improve our media practices and the media structures. That's another seminar I want to go into there. But what I want to say is that although I am somewhat pessimistic about Taiwanese media environment, but I do see some hopes because they are still very talented reporters, very responsible media organizations trying to do in-depth investigative reporting. We need to support this news organizations and give them more resources or making them more known to audiences. And yes, so that's my 2 cents. Yeah. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, Wei Ping, thank you very much for that discussion. I think that the discussion of Taiwan's media environment certainly helps to put all this in much better context for understanding. So thank you for that. I've jotted down a couple of questions I might have for you if we have time in the Q&A. Hopefully we'll have time for that. But I do want to turn next to our final speaker, who once again very generously stayed up at an uncivilized hour to participate in our event today. And that's Mr. Benjamin Sando, who is a current MA student in the Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. And he has been taking a little bit of a break from his studies with Georgetown over the past year to work as a research fellow with Double Point Lab, a civil society organization in Taiwan dedicated to strengthening Taiwan society's resilience against online disinformation and malign Chinese influence operations. Ben is also the current recipient of a GTI scholarship to support some of his work there. In addition to his work in Taiwan, Ben has also previously worked and studied in Korea as a research fellow with the Yonsei Institute of Sinology. But he has very generously offered to share with us some of his experiences or insights regarding civil society responses to disinformation. Ben, once again, thank you, and I will turn the virtual floor over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Can you guys hear me? Maybe John could give a thumbs up.
Just one moment, please.
Sure.
Ben, go again.
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, Ben, yes, go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. And also thank you for the audiences here and online. And thank you, DTI, for putting my face up in front of everybody, because it's pretty good for my ego. So I will turn to my slides that I will share, and I am just going to ask a friend who is tuning in online whether or not, if I change my slide, whether she can see. So I'm just going to wait for notice because it has been a little bit of a lag online. I'd like to know. Okay. Apparently she can hear me well. Maybe there's a bit of a lag. Okay. Well, I'll go in. I'll see how it works. So yes, I'm going to talk a little bit today, quite briefly, because I know a little bit over time, on the civil society response to the American skepticism theory. We've heard from civil society actors here today, and I'd like to talk about this space broadly. In addition to my work with Doublethink Lab, I am a GTI Taiwan scholar, and I'm investigating this space. I'll write a report, and which will be available for the end of this year. And I've done lots of field interviews to try to get a sense of what people are doing. So the most important question I need to answer right now is, why am I here? Why do we examine Taiwanese civil society, especially in the context of the American skepticism theory? Well, from a normative perspective, it's a very vibrant space that's attracting a lot of attention from international observers and media, and it demonstrates Taiwanese people's embrace of their own liberal democracy, contradicting PRC narratives that Taiwan is simply a pawn of the US. It's also innovative. There's a broad uptake of technology, including machine learning and AI, and also software tools to provide social good. And you've seen some of that today with Chahal's amazing IORG report. But most importantly, for the purposes of this discussion, we talk about Taiwanese civil society because it challenges PRC interference in ways that the Taiwanese government cannot. Now, this is not just some flaw of the Taiwanese government. This is a flaw of democratic governments everywhere. And it's one of the reasons why democratic governments have been slow and ineffective in responding to information operations. Why is this? What are the shortcomings? One of these is that liberal societies don't allow their governments to be the arbiters of truth. So we don't allow our governments to decide what narratives are true and which are false, even if they run against the security of our own nations. We also don't allow governments to be the primary authors of news. So we cannot allow governments to provide us narratives which may be beneficial to our own security. And finally, governments often lack the legitimacy or the capacity to organize certain collective action. Okay, apparently there's some lag here. I hope my audio is okay at the very least, if not my slides. So in every respect, these civil society is able to make up for these shortcomings. in a way that doesn't actually contradict with our liberal democratic norms, in fact, upholds them. And so Taiwanese society is a society that, yeah, can.
Give us just one moment where the audio is not very good. We're going to see if maybe if we go audio only with your connection, if that would improve the audio quality.
Okay, interesting. The online audiences is telling me my audio is okay. But and the PowerPoint as well, no lagging. Okay. So you guys, I suppose you can't see my slides from the audience in person.
Actually, for the in-person audience, we can still see them.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, but go ahead, Ben.
Sure. Okay, so what I've done is I've roughly organized civil society activity into 3 areas, which I've called the 3 builds. And I just want to say, if this sounds like a party congress slogan coming from a Chinese Communist, party congress, then I assure you that any similarity is purely coincidental. So the first of these builds is about building a scrutiny of mis and disinformation. The second one is about building reliable sources of news on Taiwan. And the third activity is about building individual autonomy for Taiwanese. What do I mean by these? Firstly, there is a network of civil society organizations which are focused on blunting the effects of PRC information operations, either work done to amplify or create anti-American narratives. This activity includes fact-checking, researching information operations, or promoting media literacy. Taiwan Fact Check Center, COFAX, MyGoPen are very prominent in fact-checking. IORG and Doublethink Lab researching information operations, and all to some extent engage in media literacy campaigns. I'll say that if you're very interested in learning more about fact-checking as an endeavor, I encourage you to read articles by Dr. Li, who's here today, and Dr. Chao-Ning Su, who is a Taiwan scholar this year as well. These articles are on the slides if you can see them. If not, please, I can share these slides with you later. There's a second activity. The second build is about building reliable sources of US-Taiwan news.
Ben, I'm very, very sorry. My apologies. The audio connection is very poor on this end. It's often there's a lot of buffering. So my apologies to you. I think we might go to the Q&A or start that discussion. I'm very sorry to cut off your presentation, but I think we'd like to maybe get your slides and we could perhaps post them afterwards. So my apologies, but
Yep.
The connection is very poor.
Yep, sure.
But with that, I guess we'll go to the Q&A and our discussion involving our audience, both here in person and online. Once again, as I mentioned at the outset, watching the stream and have a question you present to the panelists, you can either do so by putting the question in the YouTube chat window or by emailing it to contact@globaltaiwan.org, and we'll try to incorporate some of those questions as well as those from our live audience. I think I'll take a moment to exercise the traditional moderator's prerogative to present a commenting question to the panelists. And I will say, in reading the IORG report, after I had written my own report and then was reading the IORG report, and then Wei Ping's very detailed comments, which she very kindly shared with us on those, they were very helpful to me and actually caused me to rethink some of my own thoughts. In the past, I've done research work about the Chinese state propaganda system, and I'm probably too comfortable swimming in that lane. And so when I began working on this topic, I sort of approached it with that expectation or perspective. And I think one of the things that again, the IORG report and Wei Ping's comments were very helpful for to me was making think more about the extent to which some of the narratives discussing may actually, grow out of Taiwan's own domestic discourse and then might be played up or amplified by other actors and by the Chinese state propaganda system. But so I wanted to see if I could draw a little bit more some of your thoughts or comments about this question. Well, again, which is discussed in the IORG report and that Wei Ping commented on of sort of narrative creation versus amplification. Sort of like who is it that's creating these narratives? And then from there, who is it that's promoting them? And perhaps either if you wanted to take this example or use another one, but in Wei Ping's presentation, where she mentioned the biowarfare lab disinformation story that was in Taiwan media recently. And again, if you're not familiar with it, over the past month, there was a story in Taiwan's media that sort of played up the idea that the U.S. government was sponsoring a biological warfare lab in Taiwan. And there were some documents, or what seemed to be faked documents that were sort of in support of the story of Taiwan government officials discussing this. And again, either taking that story that started in the United Daily News, or if there's another example you had in mind, I want to see if I could draw a little bit more any thoughts you had of the sort of the source of stories like that. Again, is it something generated within Taiwan, or are there, in some instances, outlets in Taiwan that may be taking PRC material and then sort of republishing it or promoting it? So, how do you see disinformation stories like that? So, like, what do you see as being the origin or the source of those? If you can draw a clear conclusion, it's probably a much messier picture than that. But do you have any thoughts on that?
It's indeed a very impressive picture. As I said, it's really hard to be sure who are the creators. And for my own research, because my dissertation is also about the COVID-19 origin, who are promoting this series and how they are transmitted in Taiwan. And I found that, of course, we cannot deny that some of this information might be from China, but some are actually rumors in Taiwan. And we need to further ask about the intention. For those who are transmitted in Taiwan, those sources are not necessarily meaning to promote this information or to resonate with China. Sometimes they are just very sloppy media practices. And this kind of sloppy media practices, they just grab some rumors and publish it online and contribute to the very big stream of disinformation. So I also want to mention that I think to trace the very origin of the information creators, of course, is important, but we want to put more emphasis on those amplifiers because they are for the most part, they are the main contributor to the pervasiveness of this information.
All right, let me open up the Q&A to our audience. If any of the members of our audience have a question, perhaps the young lady in the back, could someone give her a microphone? If I could ask you to just introduce yourself briefly and state your question.
Sure, thanks. Thank you all. My name is Kirsten Astle. I work at a China-focused political risk advisory firm here in DC. And I was wondering if you could speak more about the America's skepticism narratives within the current election. Right now, you mentioned Hoyui as saying something about the chess piece comment, but how is it being applied or used between the different parties and candidates? Is it having an effect on the election right now? Thank you.
Okay, I'll open that up to any of our panelists who would, if you would like to comment on it. And actually, Ben, can you hear us? Is our audio connection up and working a little bit better now?
I hope so. Yeah, I wonder if it can be heard now. We can hear you as well.
If you didn't hear the question from the audience member, it was related to the ways in which these sorts of narratives may be playing out in the course of the current presidential campaign in Taiwan. But do any of you, any of the three panelists have any thoughts or comments on that?
Well, for answering all, and then, of course, yeah, and then you can do that, that either present or answer questions, or then. Okay, so U.S. skepticism in the context of, I think to put it very bluntly, the U.S. is, Taiwan is often perceived that the DPP is the U.S. supporter, while other parties argue that they want equilibrium between U.S. and China, or politicians in Taiwan that says this kind of stuff. First of all, you don't have the credibility of that or the feasibility of so-called equilibrium. Taiwan in the middle, US here, China there. Since that's the feasibility of that. No, it's being proposed by politicians in Taiwan as alternative to Taiwan being favorable of supporting the US. Multiple polls still show that overall Taiwanese societies are Taiwanese society is pro-US. It's supporting US. It's seeing US in a more favorable light than the PRC. But there are politicians. Of course, there's the even more minority one voting unification, but actually annexation, either cooperation. China. One of the politicians, the chairman of the TPP, proposed to reopen the goods and services trade agreement with China, which were heavily criticized back in 2013 and 14 in Taiwan. Ironically, he was one of the politicians who opposed the idea of having a trade agreement with China back then, but he proposed it. I think at least his party or his party supporter is proposing to reopen that negotiation. So again, to sort of draw distance from. But that's all Taiwanese politics at play. So because usually Taiwanese elections gets really it's crazier and crazier towards the end of the year. For the last 3 months, and you have to pay extra attention to what people are talking about. Narratives are not only being said by politicians, by media in Taiwan, but also by PRC actors. That's also why we did the 5 shortages analysis first. We're worried that domestic issues are also going to be a big focus for presidential ongoing will display.
Okay, thank you. Let me turn next. How about this gentleman here in the back? Could someone get a microphone? Get a microphone to this gentleman here.
My name is Jim Wu. I come from academic center from Institute of American Studies, and I currently visit Stevenson Center. The first point I want to make is a short comment. I think there is a close relation between the partisanship between those who are penguin supporters and who tend to believe in, who tend to more US skeptical, and those who are penguin supporters, they tend to be think or consider US more credible. In fact, we have two ways of survey, which can be found in the website called American Portrait. You can find the national survey. And I actually like the presentation of all panels and the comment a lot. And I have one question for Mr. Yu. I would very much to know what would be the data source of your data and how you categorize in different groups in 8 types and a lot of groups, and how you choose the events. And I can have more better understanding how the criteria, how you categorize and how you select them. Then I think it will contribute my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. As my presentation was saying, our data set is a cross-platform Mandarin document archive. Most of them from online sources, Facebook, Taiwanese media, PRC state outlet, media outlets, as big as Xinhua or Huanqiu, also smaller like provincial news websites. According to this list of over 1,300 institutions, PRC's 网信办的网络信息办公室, their internet regulator, they publish a source and a list of credible information source. We use that list to sort of track PRC outlet content. There's also web forms in Taiwan that people use, B or B card, the cross-platform database. How we choose the events, the judgment of our researchers. Most of the time, big political events in Taiwan. There's definitely events that we don't have any report on, so that might be the places where we miss some of these narratives that might contribute to today's discussion. But again, we have limited researchers that can only do so many reports per year. As for the types are again decided by the researchers according to the narrative. Yeah, there's really this really depends on how the researchers see these narratives and decide which type it goes to. But usually each type would have important key phrases, I would say. For example, chess piece is a very important phrase for the A type, Vanderbilt type. Or 乱源, source of chaos, is a very important keyword for the C type chaos type. Wei Tai, destruction of Taiwan, a very important phrase for the H type, destruction. So usually these important or significant key phrases sort of emerges the more we look at the raw data and sort of an iterative process. For example, back in 2022, me and John were talking about the U.S. skepticism. At the time, we only have had around 30 narratives. There were only, I think, 5 types. And over the years, when we investigate more narratives in terms of both their content and their behavior in the education environment, we know more about the span, scope of our research, hopefully for more readers about the existence of narratives, but also the credibility of it. And it's the beginning saying we want to focus on the unreasonable or the manipulated narratives, because there are a lot of credible and discussion-worthy topics about Taiwan-U.S. relations. Right? Those are the things that is necessary in our society. We want to focus on the unreasonable, which might be various logical problems or the lack of evidence, or the manipulated narratives that are, evoking emotion, evoking the fear of war narratives. Those are sort of our criteria of using the 84 U.S. skepticism narrative that we presented today.
Thank you, Jerhal. We are coming close to the end of our time. I think we can run over just a few more minutes. I haven't gone perhaps to this side of the room yet. Let me, how about the gentleman there?
Hi, thank you. Andrew Calkins, unaffiliated, frequent traveler to Taiwan. I was just wondering, from Yu's initial report, they had a presentation. I could see that you were doing this presentation to Japan and Korea as well. At least you say had the titles in Japanese and Korean. Actually, I was wondering, in general, what, particularly Taiwan's neighbors, what both response as well as what is their involvement in terms of helping either the disinformation campaign and going against that, or giving other positive messages as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think actually, I think try-in. I was actually in Taiwan in July, and I participated the conference held by Taiwan Fact Check Center, where they invited different fact-checking organizations all around the world to Taiwan. And I found that Taiwan's experiences are quite valuable to other countries' fact-checking initiatives, because we are also facing similar problems, issues, because China's campaign are not only targeting at Taiwan, but also other countries. And also, I think there is a Ukrainian scholar talked to me saying that they really want to know how Taiwan tackles these issues, because there are some narratives in China's conspiracy theories and resonate with Russia's conspiracy theories. So I think it would be very valuable if we can have this kind of international collaboration to compare these narratives and to compare how we tackle these issues. It will be very, I think it will be very great if we can have this kind of initiatives.
Yes, Ben, I don't know if you wanted to comment on that. The gentleman's question was in regards to sort of how these narratives may also connect to some of Taiwan's other neighbors, whether it's Japan or South Korea, and how that connects to conversations or discourse in Taiwan.
Yes. So do you mind, can you hear me? Maybe just give me a, John, can you hear me okay right now? Is that,
yeah,
my
apologies, Ben. I'm sorry. We'll have to look at the audio connection. The quality of connection there is very poor. My apologies. Well, with that, I think we're a little bit over on time. As is always the case, there is so much more about this topic that we could delve into. So there's more discussion than there is time, unfortunately. But we are at the end of our time today. I wanted to thank all of you for joining us, both those of you who came here in person today and those who joined us online. Let me ask you, it's going to be a round of applause. For all of you interested in the programs that GTI does, I would advise you to keep an eye on our website. And also, we will be having another public policy seminar in 2 weeks to look at issues connected to cultural diplomacy and Taiwan. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks to everyone for joining us.